bring in Platformer News founder Casey Newton. Casey, thanks for being with us. I assume you just heard our discussion. Let me bring up a tweet by Bill Gurley, a subtweet, let's call it, because he didn't specify who he's talking to, but he posted the definition of sunk cost fallacy shortly after Meta came out with those earnings. What do you think here? Is this what Zuckerberg sort of caught in? He's poured so much money into this thing that he just can't get out now.
I mean, it's clear that this is a true bet the company moment for Mark Zuckerberg. And whether you think that this is a sunk cost issue or not, the fact is he's been battered by Tim Cook's policy decisions in Apple around his ad business, and he's determined not to let Tim Cook control his future. So in his mind, he has to make the metaverse work for Meta to have any sort of future at all. So I understand why investors are so spooked by what they're seeing, but I think that in Zuckerberg's mind, he truly doesn't have any other choice. He either builds the next big computing platform or he's stuck just trying to, optimize an ever-shrinking ad market on iOS.
Right, but Julia, there's been this idea that, at least what he's working on in terms of the metaverse has important developments in artificial intelligence. He's spent a lot of money on talent there. Is this something that later on, let's say he is too early to the metaverse or it doesn't turn out the way he expects, that he can pivot all of the research and development they've done to make the core business better?
Well, I think these are two very different things here, right? Because if you think about the way that they're investing in AI for the ad business, Meta has to invest in AI to make ads more targeted and measurable. That's because they've lost all that access to data due to Apple's operating system change. So one of their big investments is that type of AI. It's a different type of AI to create avatars with legs, which is something which is the next generation of Horizon World, of really bringing in a sort of more full version of an avatar. So I do think we're talking about different things here. And it's one thing to have Meta innovate on ad targeting, ad measurement, different formats, and another of them to really think about what the visuals are that are going to be compelling for this futuristic world that we may or may not be living in a couple of years. But I think it was so interesting to see some of those chip companies go up on the news that Meta is going to be doubling down on these metaverse investments because it's a whole new world to talk about headsets and all the graphic chips that you need for that. So I just think this idea of Mark Zuckerberg trying to divorce himself from reliance on Apple, how far he's willing to go for that, and how long it'll take to get all of us to a place where we're spending more time in the metaverse.
Casey, it's an extraordinary bet, to say the least, that Mark Zuckerberg is making. And I wonder if you can kind of compare this with Facebook's halting efforts at making a smartphone, which they eventually pulled away from. And I just thought of another potential metaphor for what could be happening here, right? You could be right about the importance of flight in human transportation, but invest in airships and not airplanes, right, based on your timing and maybe some nuances around the technology. We don't know if Zuckerberg is investing in airships or airplanes right now and if his timing is right. And I'll leave the Hindenburg opportunity just sort of hanging out there, Casey.
Well, I think it's a good question. One thing that's maybe worth saying, we're just going to know a lot more in a year, right? Because we know that Apple, too, is trying to figure out whether it's building an airship or an airplane. We know that Google is working on something similar like this, right? So there are a lot of companies out there. The difference between Meta and the rest is that Meta is building in public, and also Meta's business is really struggling, right? So I think a year from now, we're going to be able to make some more direct comparisons, and we're going to know, is Meta actually leading the pack here? Is all this R&D paying off? Or did Apple spend way less money and get a much higher ROI?
Casey, while we have you, last question for you on that tweet from Elon Musk this morning. Sort of, what do you call that even? Reaching out to advertisers after a lot of the smack talking he's been doing over the last few months. At the bottom line, though, Casey, he's got $13 billion in debt to service. How do advertisers know if this is genuine or not?
Well, I mean, they're going to know it's genuine if they actually get some ROI on their Twitter ads, right? And the problem with that company for a long time has been that the ROI has been terrible. So I'm glad to hear Elon say that Twitter is not going to become a free-for-all hellscape. And I do think that that is good news for advertisers. But the company has a lot to do on the product front, on the sort of client relationship front, to actually turn it into a meaningful business. So Elon's going to have to sort of put his money and his product team where his mouth is there.